Welcome to Nights of Roleplay, an adventuring podcast. This is an actual play Dungeons & Dragons podcast. Royalty-free music provided by Kevin MacLeod, Michael Gelfie Studios, Plate Mill Games, and Tabletop Audio. And now, to adventure. Hello, listeners. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Nights of Roleplay. I'm DM Chris, and today we have a very special episode. This is the first time that we've ever done an interview-style episode. I figured that maybe once in a while I'll throw one of these kinds of episodes into our regular adventure episodes. This isn't quite the norm, but I thought it would be fun because I backed a Kickstarter for a product called Adventures in Teaching and Learning with TTRPGs. And if you're unfamiliar with the terms, TTRPG is tabletop role-playing game. And through the Kickstarter, I met my guest for today, Dr. Maryanne Cullinan. She'll talk a little bit about her history and what she does and how the product sort of came into existence. We talked a little bit on their Discord. And so I have with me Maryanne. Maryanne, it's nice to have you on the podcast today. How are you?
Hello, I'm great. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about who you are and what you sort of do in your everyday life.
Sure. I am a middle school teacher in New Hampshire, and I'm an education PhD, and I teach enrichment, which is the best job ever. It sort of came out of gifted and talented programming in the 90s. But the way I do it, it's for everyone who's interested. So I have about half the school. It's kind of square pegs and round holes. So I have all the sort of traditional gifted and talented kids. I have a lot of kids who don't learn traditionally very well, a lot of kids with learning disabilities and who are neurodiverse. And we do everything from improv to dissection to math enrichment to reading help to costume design to kind of anything needed in our community. So we have a really good time.
That's great. Yeah, I found out that after I backed the Kickstarter and got onto the Discord, I found out that Maryanne and I live about an hour away from each other in New Hampshire.
Yeah,
I thought that was really cool.
it really is.
So how did the idea behind Adventures in Teaching and Learning with TTRPGs, how did that idea come about?
Sure. So this is sort of the maiden voyage of Tabletop EDU, which is a little organization that was co-founded with myself and Garrett Munro, who actually approached me. He had seen a bunch of my talks online and just sort of looked at the things that I was doing and said, hey, can we work together? Can we start to do something in this space? Because what I'm finding with my research is that, there is a whole group of really smart, very thoughtful game researchers. A lot of them are in Europe. A lot of them are focused on LARP, but they're focused on all sorts of things, and they have all this theory, and it's great.
Okay.
Completely independently, there are a whole bunch of teachers who have sort of come up with this idea that using role-playing games has been important for them in their lives or is important to them in their teaching. And so part of what I'm not seeing a lot of is anything in that space that kind of tries to bring some of that theory and some of the practice together so that we can have actual practitioners doing their best, most informed work.
Okay. All right, that's cool. And you said that they were into LARP, which is live action role playing.
Yes.
Which I've done a little bit of. Have you done any LARPing yourself?
Only a little, and it's a hoot. It's really fun. I'm a theater kid. I didn't do role-playing games when I was a girl in the 90s. There wasn't really a spot at the table for girls at that point in New Hampshire. And so I became an improv girl and a theater kid. And I came to role-playing games much later through my students and through teaching. And so
Okay.
but I have some very close friends who are active in the live action role play community near me, and that's been my experiences for helping them out as an NPC. It's been great.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I started playing D&D in the 80s, and I don't remember there being a lot of girls sitting with us and playing. It took decades before like women were actually sitting at the table, and I'm not sure exactly what led to that. More so, but I'm really happy that that is the case. And in our podcast group, my wife is part of our group, and our friend Sarah, and nowadays it's like it just seems silly. Like, why wouldn't you have anybody who wants to be in the group in the group? But in the 80s and maybe in the early 90s, it just wasn't very common. So
Right.
I'm very glad to see that shift, especially because it seems like in our culture right now, in our global culture, there is much more inclusivity that is happening across all different sort of areas, all kinds of platforms. Being an on-camera and voice actor, I see it all the time in commercials and in voiceover and all sorts of other things like that in film and television, even children's animation. Um, so it's nice to kind of hear a little bit of your background with that. So what is your experience actually playing D&D or playing any kind of tabletop role playing game?
Yeah, so my sort of apocryphal story is that I think it was in 2018, I went to Penny Arcade Expo, PAX Unplugged,
Yeah,
and I saw a panel there called Hand Her a Sword, which was about how you could use D&D with middle school age girls to work on social skills and friendship. And so I went, and I was like, yeah, I'm interested and invested in middle school girls, and this sounds like fun. And so I left that panel and I came back to New Hampshire and just started walking around being like, hey, you're a girl. You want to make some friends? You want to learn how to play this with me? And it was Stranger Things had just come out. And so we started our very first group, and it was called the Slay Queens.
nice.
And they did very little slaying. They did a lot of flirting and getting pets. But that was such a rousing success. And then that led to there being a much bigger group. We actually have a group of kids that fluctuates between about 45 and 60 who play D&D every Friday after school now, called Heroes Hall. And
Nice.
so it's become a very big part of our school culture. And so then I started playing, I had a lot of adult friends who all sort of had the same story as I did, where it was like, yeah, I always wanted to play that and I meant to, but it didn't happen, or for whatever reason, and a couple of us had. So we've been playing every couple of weeks, or a couple times a week sometimes since
Yeah,
then, and it was extremely good for my soul during COVID when I
yeah.
was climbing the walls as an extreme extrovert in my own home. So it's been wonderful, and that's really it. At this point, I like playing other systems, not just D&D.
Sure.
But and then from there, playing that, I realized that I'd been using role-playing games in my classroom, but I wouldn't have known to call them that.
Gotcha.
And that gave me this question of I'm noticing that when I use something like a role playing game, maybe a simulation, right? It's all kind of mixed
Sure.
in a classroom setting. I'm seeing different kids be really successful, not just my traditionally successful kids, although many of them are too. And there's an investment level, and there are things happening that I want to have happen in my classroom. So why is that? And that's the question I brought with me into my PhD program.
Okay.
What needs to be part of a role playing game to make the magic happen? And that's
Okay.
kind of been my question throughout. And so some of that has culminated in some of the things that are in the book, the idea being whether you use role-playing games, D&D or whatever in a club setting or a library setting or in the classroom, there's a lot of practical suggestions for you to help make it happen, and some theory base and some suggestions of NPCs and settings to
Hmm.
sort of help you along your own journey. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's making me think of the fact that like when I first started playing, it was, you know, me and my friends, we were like the nerdy sort of outcast kids, and it wasn't cool at that time. And, just before the pandemic started, there was it was starting to gain some popularity with like Stranger Things and Critical Role and things like that. And it
Right.
started to become very popular. And then there was this explosion of online gaming during the pandemic, and people have continued to carry that forward now that we're thankfully all very much back in person. And it's like this global phenomenon now, and everybody is involved in it, and people that have heard of it and were even just sort of dismissive of it are now realizing how fun it is. And I think it's really wonderful that you've taken sort of the experiences of your life and with your teaching, and you're trying to sort of merge those things together. So tell me a little more about Garrett and about his sort of contribution to this and how the two of you are working together on the project.
Yeah, so we are co-writers. So he and I both wrote about half of the book.
Hmm.
He has done some teaching at the college level, and he has been an educator in Asia. And he's definitely much more of an entrepreneur than I am. So
Hmm.
we've had some really great complementary skill sets to sort of make these projects come right. I'm the person who, I'm an academic and I'm a teacher, and he's the one who knows how to like actually get the book published and
Right.
get the Kickstarter going. But he also has a lot of really wonderful ideas too, and he spends a lot of time. His journey sounds like it was similar to yours, and he really talks about how he was not a strong reader and really thinks about how the group that he was in and reading the old D&D books really helped him become a stronger reader, have a great social connection, and sort of ultimately sent him on his journey towards higher education. And he doesn't think that those things would have happened without role-playing games. So he likes to think a lot about just sort of what is the value of playing.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with that because I'm in a teaching setting where I also have a curriculum that I must deliver.
Hmm.
I have that added layer as well.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So some of the things that I'm thinking about as we're talking are like, over the years, I've learned that people who have played tabletop role-playing games, I think I read an article that talked about how tabletop role-playing games can save lives, or like D&D can save lives, something along those lines, because there are all sorts of benefits that you don't necessarily think about. I mean, you may watch, shows like Critical Role and all the different streaming shows and say, oh, this is cool, this is fun, this is entertaining. But there are people who have, for example, very strong social anxiety, or they are, as you mentioned, like, they have neurodiversity of one kind or another, anxiety disorders, things of that nature. So being able to be in a group and play a game and play this character can really seems to help benefit people in those ways. Can you
I have
dig
a
down
great
a little
story
deeper?
about this.
Yeah, yeah, please.
Yes. This is a story for today. This is a true story. I'm going to use a pseudonym. But so I meet with my DMs twice a week
Hmm.
as a class. It's called DM's Guild, and we do planning because my after school group, Heroes Hall, is entirely run by children. And I have Will Pills Martin, that is not a pseudonym, is my dear friend and colleague who is my co conspirator for this. And he has worked incredibly hard with a student, and she is neurodiverse and she is painfully shy,
Hmm.
like so, so shy. And over the course of the past 2 years, like, at first her character mostly just sat there and watched and then became more active. And about halfway through this year, she's in eighth grade, she decided that she wanted to DM. And so we've both worked with her. Then my DMs were part of the Therapeutic and Applied Gaming Summit, which is an online conference. and she was part of that.
Okay.
And so last month she got an award. And she had to go up and stand in front of the school, like just to go get the award, and she
Sure.
couldn't do it alone. So she and I went up together. And tomorrow, we wanted to recognize his good work. And so tomorrow, she's going to stand in front of the entire school and talk about him because she's not going to talk as her, she's going to talk as a DM in her
Oh.
DM voice, in her storytelling voice. But like the connection she's made with him, and if she's going to tell it in a fantastical way, like there is this man and he is a hero amongst us, and she talks in an accent, and like this has allowed her, like I can't wait. People are gonna freak out. They don't know. They don't know this about her. But she's become such a leader because she has this emotional connection with Will and with me and with has this other persona that she can use that
Mhm.
isn't shy,
Right.
right? And it's allowed her to make connections with me as a teacher that she wouldn't have normally made as a neurodiverse student
Sure.
necessarily, right? Because she comes and she's like, oh, I have this idea that, it's a dream creature that's a deer and it can shoot laser beams or whatever. I'm like, that's rad. And so she's like, I drew 85 pictures of it. Yeah, and it's so good. Um, and so that's just one very small example of that. And as an adult, I have a friend who has pretty severe PTSD
Mhm.
from being a combat vet in Afghanistan. And when we first started this, he's like, I don't know. He didn't really want to come every week, but it's given us such a good excuse to talk to each other all the time
Mhm.
about something that isn't that he can't sleep at night, right?
Right.
Where he's like, oh, my character and your character, like, this is their backstory, and here's this funny thing, and oh, I think your character would like this, and now we all get together every couple of weeks, and he has this big friend group, and he's often the character who's like the big guy who protects people,
Sure.
which,
Sure.
he's a soldier. That's what he does. But it's really fun, and it's given us a shared language
Yeah.
and a new set of shared experiences, even though they're not real experiences.
Right.
Your brain doesn't know that. And so even if you have these experiences in a fantasy kind of setting, since it's a shared fantasy,
Right.
um, it still gives you that insider talk, those jokes in
Yeah.
common, right?
That's
So
awesome. I
yeah.
love hearing about that. That's great. So the actual product itself, refresh my memory, like where is it right now, like in development? I mean, I know that I backed the Kickstarter and I did a certain pledge level, and I'm gonna brag a little bit because I got my name in the book.
Hmm.
If you look for Christopher Buckner's School of the Arcane, I believe is what it is. It is in the book. Where is it in development right now? As far as like when you can get a digital version, when you can get a physical version, where is it in that realm?
Yeah, so the physical version, we just got a print copy, like a test copy, a couple
Okay.
days ago,
Okay.
and we're so excited. So we're hoping that within the month, we'll be able to start to send them out to our backers. And the digital version is out to backers. And that's really exciting. And we've had a couple versions of it. I think it's done now. So um,
Okay.
and so that's really exciting. And I think I'm such a bad capitalist. I'm like, I don't even know off the top of my head where you can get it. So our website is tabletop edu,
Mhm.
and you can get it there
Okay.
too.
Awesome. And for our listeners, it is the end of May as we're recording this, and I'm not
Yes.
sure when this episode will actually be released. But so you're saying that like physical copies should be going out in June of 2025?
That's right. Yeah, it's okay. It's tabletop.edu.org. And you can just, if you scroll down, you can purchase a copy, a hardcover, or a ebook.
Okay.
And yeah, and I think what's really important to me, I'm a teacher, and so a lot of times people are trying to sell me things.
Hmm.
And so, like, yeah, I would love for you to buy this book and I would love for you to read it and because I put a lot of work into it and I'm really proud of what we've done. But what I really want is people to sort of reach out and be part of a community with each other, right? We play
Yeah.
TTRPGs in parties. It's not safe to go alone, so we, take this and we go together. And that's really how lots of learning and thinking and happen. And so I'm happy to be that person. I'm happy to be part of it. Our Discord's part of it, but finding your people and then working together to solve a problem and be part of an epic adventure. I mean, that's why we do this. And so that is true in game, but it should be true out of game too. We can all learn a lot from each other. And, a lot of what I've learned I've just sort of figured out along the way, and people have helped me.
Yeah.
And, the more we can bounce ideas off each other, I think the better we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So like if a teacher were to get a hold of this product, get a hold of your book, what would your recommendation be for sort of integrating into their system? Would it be something where they would have it be part of their class day? Would it something be like an after school program? Like what is your envision? How do you envision them taking the book and implementing it?
Yes, there's basically two different ways that there are two parallel tracks kind of at the same time, and you've just touched on both of them.
Okay,
There's the after school or lunchtime kind of club track,
sure.
and then there's the track that's more about using it as pedagogy in a classroom setting.
Okay,
And so in terms of the club track, that's much more of your classic D&D club or Kids on Bikes or Monster of the Week, like some system. And we have a lot of suggestions for how to run very large groups, sort of how we've done that. What do you do, when everybody just wants to kill everything? What do you do when everybody just wants to flirt with everything? Right. And all of that I think is really, really valuable.
Yes,
And I think what has been spoken to sort of less is how do you use it in an educational setting? And in that, not that it isn't educational outside of a classroom, right? But
right,
specifically to be the vehicle for content, you have to strip away a lot of the fussiness. Right. I would not use D&D in a classroom sort of out of the box because it has a lot of its own gravitas,
sure.
which is part of what people like because it's part of what makes it fun is being able to, you know, cast Melf's minute meteors or whatever, right? Like that's so fun. But that's not a good use of my time in a classroom setting
Sure.
to teach everybody what Melf's minute meteors are. I need something that's very streamlined, something where the focus is going to primarily be on the thing that I want students to learn. Right? If I'm trying to teach kids reading comprehension, then most of the mechanics of the game have to involve going through texts
Mhm.
and comprehending their reading. Or if I want them to be working on math problem solving, then most of what I need to be doing is solving puzzles that involve math problem solving. And those kinds of things aren't the kind of thing where you can just pick up a book and be like, here's the answer.
Right.
That's something that you have to be able to sort of figure out on your own. And I think that the book can really help you along that
Okay.
journey. But I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier too, where there isn't just one right answer. If there was, somebody would have come up with it already. And a lot of people will try to tell you they have to tell have you buy their product. But for a classroom teacher, you really do need to be able to make it your own.
Okay.
And so the book is much more, it has the theory, it has a lot of ideas for sort of how to think about it, um,
Okay.
and plan. And you can
Okay.
start small. You're not going to go in the next day and turn your entire classroom into a fantasy role-playing game for every single day until the end of the school year. That's not even necessarily best practice.
Right.
But being able to have that kind of idea is very good for kids, and it challenges them in ways that they are not typically challenged in school.
Okay. Awesome. Well, this sounds like a really wonderful product. I mean, obviously, I backed it and I met you through it, and I'm excited about that. Maybe at some point we can have you come and play with us and be a guest on the podcast in that
I
capacity.
would die. I would love that so much. It'd be so fun.
Is there anything else before we sign off that you want to say? You've talked about the website, you've talked about sort of how to implement it and what the book is all about. Is there anything you want to say before we sign off?
I guess I just wanted to talk about really quickly what you had said about diversity
Yeah,
in
sure.
role-playing games.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of that going on right now, and I think it's really, really wonderful. When I look at my role-playing game club, about half of them are girls. We live in New Hampshire. There are like not a lot of people of color where we live, but there are
That's
people
true.
of color. There are, you know, children who are LGBTQ,
Hmm.
and there are people who are figuring everything out. And I think that it's really important for all of us who are the old people now, who have been
Hmm.
doing this for a long time, or have sort of power over the space in any way, to be really thinking about purposefully what moves we make it an inclusive setting.
Yeah,
Right? I know that part of why I have a lot of girls in my group is because I'm a girl
right.
and I present as a girl and I ask girls to join.
Sure.
And I'm like, hey, you look like you would like to do this. They don't always look like they would like to do it, but some of them say yes, right? And so, and thinking about what is the story I'm telling, and who is in power and whose voice is being lifted up in the story and whose voice is not being lifted up in the story. And if every story is, generic fantasy Western Europe with a bad king
Yeah,
and serfs and,
yeah,
a very heteronormative power structure,
right.
that's not a story that is going to resonate with everybody.
Hmm.
And that's not a story where people are going to say, I'm represented there. And so I think that some of it has happened on its own, but I also think it's so, so important for us as we're trying to work with kids and bring our next generation of nerds out into the light that we really make it so that everybody can be part of the team.
That's awesome.
Because we don't just have all fighters or all wizards. We got to have a cleric. We've got to have a sorcerer, right? We want diversity in our team. It makes it a better
Yeah,
team. So I would challenge everybody, and I always challenge myself and continue to look at like the stories you're telling and the structures you're using, and
yeah,
just make sure that it's a story that everybody can see themselves in, and
yeah.
that's how we get lots of people who want to be part of the story.
That's awesome. I think that's really wonderful. You spoke very eloquently, and that's a really wonderful way to end our very special first interview episode for Nights of Roleplay. And if you could do me a favor, usually when we sign off at the end of our adventure sessions, we say good night to the listeners. So would you join me? And on the count of three, we're just going to say good night, listeners. You ready?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Good
Good
night,
night,
listeners.
listeners. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review anywhere this podcast can be found. Our social media links, plus additional content, can be found on our website at knightsofroleplay.com. Please tell your friends about Knights of Roleplay, an adventuring podcast, and spread the word through social media. Your help and support are greatly appreciated.